Welcome everybody to Conflict to Growth, Lessons from War Zones for Therapeutic and Social Change. And by way of introduction, Yeshim, I'm going to read the first two paragraphs from your bio. So Yeshim is a London-based specialist in conflict resolution, organizational resilience, and leadership under pressure. With a background rooted in engagement in complex international disputes, she applies her expertise to corporate and organizational challenges, helping teams, partners, and stakeholders build trust, navigate tensions, and transform conflicts into growth opportunities. What sets Yeshim apart is her ability to draw on lessons from her work in challenging conflict zones, including direct engagement with former combatants and paramilitaries. This unconventional experience has equipped her with a unique perspective on dialogue, transformation, and sustainable peace building, which she applies across sectors. Yeshim, it's a real privilege for us to have you here on the seminar program. Thank you. And over to you for your presentation. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are. It's amazing to see how many different places people are joining from. It's wonderful, wonderful to have you all here. Before I start, just so that I have an idea, just a bit of interaction maybe on chat. Some of you, well, you've written where you're joining from. I am curious what you do. It's like one sentence, therapist, activist, or if you like, just if you could just write once with kind of because everyone sees, so we get to know each other a little bit. And then I will start. Am I in presence of many? Oh, great. It's coming on. Artist, coach, therapist in training. Great. I'm a counselor. Wonderful. Therapist in schools with primary age children. Great. Clinical psychologist working in London. Writer, teacher. Wonderful. Therapist. Community engagement. Great. Any more? Anyone else? Mediator and facilitator. Oh, how wonderful. Me too. Trainee clinical psychologist. Trying to stay as politically active as possible. Great. Psychotherapist in private practice. Psychotherapist and Palestine activist. Amazing. Therapist in training. Counselor, integrative psychotherapist, researcher. Amazing. Wow. Great audience. How amazing. Well, you're very welcome. Therapist working in domestic and sexual violence. Wonderful. Okay, behaviors and safeguarding officer. Okay, great. Thank you for writing that. It's very helpful to me to know my audience. So there was already a little bit of introduction, so I'm not going to get into my qualifications and other stuff, but maybe just to say this. So I worked, I've been in my field, I work in the field of peace building, conflict resolution, and dialogue building. And I've been in this field for about 16, 17 years, and another field before relevant to this beforehand, which was to do with mediation. So I have worked in very high stake environments for a very long time. And I have seen some remarkable things. And when you work in a war zone, you do see remarkable things. But for me, what really jumped out was how beyond all the violence and suffering and divisions that I saw, I observed patterns of conflict, patterns of resilience, which apply to so many different layers. It's just not just in a country, which I'll be talking about all of that in a minute, but not just in Lebanon and Cyprus and Sri Lanka and Colombia, but the dynamics I saw there applied with smaller communities, even feuds, family feuds, or even problems between couples or children, which is not really my area. But I'm a part of a family. I am a mum, and even those patterns I saw in my little relationships, in smaller scale, even I saw similar patterns between myself and myself. So that grew as a big fascination. And what I asked myself was, if that is the case, then what can we learn from those areas that I worked for that length of time? What lessons can we learn? So I started working on that about a few years ago now, and I distilled a number of lessons which I thought was interesting, and which is what I'm going to be talking to you about today. And my question is, how can we use these lessons to for if we're I don't know, in social activism, or in our families, even in personal development, and even therapy rooms. So there are some amazing pragmatic tools that are available to all of us. So with that introduction, what I will do now is actually I will share my screen. Let me just do that. Hopefully we will get that right. And yeah. Okay, so I named the talk "Conflict, the Growth, Lessons from War Zones for Therapeutic and Social Change." So what I will now do is, first of all, before all these lessons that I learned and I distilled, actually there's seven of them. I like the number 7, and it happened to be 7. I want to give you a little photographic illustration of the places that I worked in, just so that you have an idea about where I was and what kind of places I worked in. So I will start with you probably know all of this, but I'll say anyway. Cyprus is the biggest island in the Mediterranean, and it has had basically long-standing tensions going back to 1950s, and conflict erupted many times. But since 1974, the island is now divided into two, with very limited interaction between the two societies, Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. And it is a deeply divided society, not conflict between the two sides, but also between within the society as well. So I think that much introduction is probably enough. So just to give you an idea, but this is a house that was left in 1974. Nobody has gone back to it, so it is behind the barbed wires, and there is an area in between where no one can get access to. This photograph, I love this photograph because as you can see, well, the little tower you see is for the UN soldiers, and if you look at how relaxed that little girl is in the swing, just such close proximity to a watchtower, completely oblivious. So it's actually a little lovely postcard of how how much we can normalize things in different contexts. Another photograph. This is fascinating. I mean, when in 1974, when the Turkish army came into Cyprus, this is the old Cyprus airport, and it was abandoned, and nobody has ever been. So as you could see, it's still untouched, seats there. It's just like frozen in time. In fact, this photograph, somebody was having a Coke, a bottle of Coke, and they just left it there. So these are quite speaking, just very revealing. And again, an airplane which landed at the time, and I don't know what happened to the passengers there, but it has not been touched for over 45 years now. Now, what I did there is this is where we worked. What I did was the project. Now I will give you an idea about the project, and I will be very brief because it is really the details. If you're interested, I can tell you another time. You can contact me. So the aim, basically, we were invited by the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP. The aim was, we are asked to bring groups of politicians, business leaders, youth, women, civil society together. And the brief was, please go and find the most polarized as well as the moderates to bring together. So we aim to bring people together who've never seen or spoken to each other before. Now here, just to give you an idea about how this sort of thing works, we started engaging with the two sides in 2011, and it took us 18 months to prepare them to get into a room, and 6 months later we brought them together. So first of all, the first lesson for me is that when there is conflict, so much preparation is needed, and people don't normally understand that. So what we did was we brought South Africans and Northern Irish negotiators just so that they can experience, they can share some experiences, and they wouldn't want to sit in the same airplane. They couldn't decide a room in Cyprus. Neither side would be willing to cross the other side to go and have a meeting together. Although they actually wanted to have this meeting, we were invited there to do this. They couldn't find a room. So actually we took them to Malta because they wouldn't actually sit together. So stakes are sometimes so high. And anyway, to cut it short, they just set up a dialogue. We've set up the dialogue platform. It took about another year, and it was a successful project. And the only reason why I say successful is not because I think so, but because 11 years on, they're still meeting every month. So to me, that's success. So this is a kind of project that I did, and I worked in other places, which are places like there's a little list there: Cyprus, Northern Ireland, South Africa, Bosnia, Colombia, Lebanon, and some countries in the Central Asia, but not limited to it. So some of the field work included those. Now let's come to what I saw, what absolutely fascinated me. So I just want to read the screen. You can read it too. Just as branches of a river repeat at every scale, conflict patterns replicate between communities, within communities, and within individuals. So this is what I find absolutely fascinating. During all this work, I saw violence, suffering, deep divisions, as well as some amazing resilience. But seeing all the patterns coming in my family, in my workplace, in my own community, I joined here today from London. I'm not from this country, but in so many contexts, that how people feel, behave, believe are the same. That's really fascinating for me. And I started thinking about it. So I started thinking about how I could formulate this in my mind. And I kept thinking about fractality. Fractality in nature, as you can see now, the first photograph is Sibu River in Sarawak, Borneo. It's an aerial photograph. I was there and I didn't take this photograph, obviously, but you can see that the branches, it just repeats, the patterns repeat itself. If you look at the broccoli, again, you could see that each florets of it replicates the whole shape. This third photograph, hopefully you could see my cursor, is our lungs and our, or our veins or trees. Again, the same, you could see the fractality there. And the final one is fern, this fourth photograph. As you can see, each of the segments replicate the shape of the whole bigger segment. So it is it's a kind of infinite fractality represents infinitely deep concept to me. So each pattern made up of similar copies of itself, and those smaller copies are made up of even smaller copies again and forever. So there is a bit of maybe poetic analogy here, the poetic metaphor, but that really spoke to me. So what did I see? What is it that I thought was similar at different scales? So, for example, hopes and fears. In all contexts, people hope for positive outcome and fear for loss or harm. In all contexts, I can see, or most of the context, expectations are invariably unrealistic, because people think that well, after the conflict is finished, or even within social activism, if we remedy this thing, if we implement this tool to get over this problem within social justice, everything will be fine, happily ever lived after. We just want to believe that human beings are created to believe and hope for that, but it's never realistic. Pride is often very common. Personal or group pride can prevent compromise. Othering, I love this word, othering. So there's always us, and it's like a tribal thinking. So we're always us and others, and sometimes othering a group becomes our identity. So how much people are attached to conflict? If you look around, a lot of the places, I'm not talking about the extreme violence and war zones going, I'm not going, but if you look at non-violent conflict, people say, I'd be so grateful when the conflict is over. But actually, when the conflict is over, there is a gap which needs to be filled, because it actually bonds, othering people bonds me with my own tribe. So these are all instinctive and very repetitive. Communication failure. I mean, communication failure, avoidance of communication is power struggles. So these are always common. So so then I asked myself, if conflict patterns replicate, so I'm just reading the screen, could healing patterns replicate too? So between and within communities or within individuals. And so if they do, then how do we take this forward? How does that help us? Is what I keep thinking about. And so I will try to explore in this talk how understanding and addressing these repeated patterns at the micro or macro level can help us work towards healing. And I will give some tools, very practical. One of the things about war zones is, the stakes are so high that we have to be very, very pragmatic. So some of the tools there, sometimes I go to corporate organizations, sometimes I work with NGOs, with the United Nations and others, that these tools, which are typically used in very high-stake environments, actually apply and be useful for many other contexts. So then if that is the case, if healing patterns can also replicate, then what can peace building methods and tools from war zones support, how they can support individual and social healing? I know that a lot of you told me that you're therapists and counselors and mental health professionals, and there are others too, but I know that all of you are interested in social activism, me too, by the way. So the social healing, how do we implement this to social healing? What can we get out of this? So 7 lessons from war zones. Okay, so lesson number 1. So mapping conflicts is often overlooked. Mapping conflict reveals dynamics, complexities, and roots. And I'm just reading the screen now, and it helps us understand deeper layers. It helps us link macro and micro. It separates roots from symptoms and prevents harm. And I'll give you a couple of examples of mapping, but you can map anything. You can you can map the actors, who is a part of this conflict, or who is a part of this problem within a social injustice problem. You can map positions, you can map interests, you can map power, relations, dynamics, issues can be mapped, timelines can be mapped, and geographies can be mapped. So there are ample number of tools available to us if we want to use them. Now, I want to stay for now. I'm going to give an example which is very heartbreaking. I want to stay with the last part, which is prevents harm. So mapping prevents harm. So I want to stay with that. And I'm going to give you an example from Lebanon, where inadequate mapping caused social harm. So this is Beirut, Shatila refugee camp. Just to give you an idea, first of all, I'll give you very briefly, like 5-6 bullet points, what this camp is about and what you're seeing on the screen, because it's very difficult to understand at the first look. Is basically, this is an originally Palestinian refugee camp in Beirut. Now it's also taking Syrians. So this camp was established in 1948, so it's been there for a very long time. And it was built for only 3,000 people. But if you look at the small photograph, it has built, you can see that there are some buildings put, it's a bit difficult to see, but it's now has 15,000 people. So with the infrastructure of 3,000 people, it now accommodates 15,000 people. So the situation is very, very dire. The living conditions are very dire. Now, if you look at the bigger photograph, this is something that I took. It's just one of the streets, and there are many streets like that. Just to give you an example, what you see, do you see these cables? Now, these cables are electricity cables, which are illegally, placed over time from one flat to another, because this infrastructure is not there to sustain 15,000 people. The place was built for 3,000 people only. And on average, I was told that a person, on average, mostly children, die every other week just because they're electrocuted in this system. So we're talking about a place where situation is very different than perhaps at least where I am, in the UK. Some of the things that we complain about, it's a very different ball game. Now, the harm related example that I was going to give you, which happened because of a lack of inadequate mapping, is that a European organization basically went to this camp a few years ago because there was a lot of domestic violence, and a European organization went in there, got a number of women there in a room, and they trained them in women's empowerment. Now, on the surface, it looks like a very honorable project. It is. It's a very honorable cause. It is. So they were taken in a room. These people were, you know, been taught self-confidence, boundaries, and many other things. And you know what happened? A year later, domestic violence. So the agency went there to reduce the domestic violence, whereas after that project, domestic violence doubled next year. The reason, so what went wrong is because they failed to map the causes. So this society, you know, people who live there come from a very traditional family units. These are very traditional family units. Men in these camps often feel emasculated because their gun is taken away, their job is taken away, they're not allowed to work. So they're at home all day. And then their wife comes back from this course and asks them to do the dishes. So we may not be able to, or at least this organization, a European organization, what they didn't understand was things as we understand don't work over there. So what they did wrong is, if I could show you on the tool now. So there is one tool I love. It is conflict tree. We call it root mapping or conflict tree. So if you think about it, now the problem is gender-based vulnerability. And the root causes are where you see the roots. So overcrowded, poor shelter, economic insecurity, and unaddressed trauma. Remember, these people are refugees. And the symptoms are gender-based violence, poor mental health, poor reproductive health. There are so many, but I just simplified it just so that to make my point. So this organization didn't really understand the problem. The problem was not gender-based violence. That was the symptom. So we often confuse symptoms and problems. And just trying to address the symptom without understanding the root causes is very likely to cause harm. So lesson number 2, there will be a question and answer session. Please make a note if you have any questions. I will only speak at maybe 15 more minutes and then the rest of the time. So lesson number 2, expectation management. So unmanaged expectations derail long-term transformation. So expectation management is very important. Most conflicts are unsolvable. That's why I don't really use conflict resolution. I use conflict transformation. You can transform that into something, but most conflicts never fully resolved. So it's about aiming to manage them. Can I coexist with this with this other person, rather than I'm going to be best friends? You know, Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots will never be best friends, but can they live together? Can they live together without being so divided? So that's about progress, not perfection. It's looking at the progress and not perfection. And if we are, for example, talk about social justice, if we talk about activism within social justice, again, are we ever going to achieve everything that we aim for? At least not for very, very long time. But how do we measure success? How do you measure success? So we're talking about small incremental gains in equality and inclusion, for example, if that's what we're working towards, rather than just expecting that everything will be resolved overnight. One example from a place I worked in, Northern Ireland. So in Northern Ireland communities, well, as you know, there was Good Friday Agreement is now in place, which is the peace agreement between the two sides in Northern Ireland for decades now. But there's still very strong sectarian divide. And Northern Ireland, I consider Northern Ireland a success because they can coexist, but they are not they will never be good friends. I was there about 2, 3, 4 months ago, and the areas are so divided. The communities, the neighborhoods are so divided, and you just don't cross between the two. Belfast was a bit different, but the rest of the Northern Ireland was like that. And these two photographs are what they call peace walls. So these are, you know, like for example, it says you are now entering Loyalist Sandy Row, Heartland, South Belfast. So you now know it's the UFF zone. You now know that past that area, you're in a different zone. So they're very deeply segregated, but they don't kill each other anymore. And there is so much progress. So for me, it is still a success. This woman, I love this quote. Again, realistic expectations. In a good negotiation, everybody gets something and no one gets everything. This is Christiana Figueres. I hope I'm pronouncing properly. Basically she was executive secretary. She led the UN climate change secretariats of delivery of 6 consecutive yearly global negotiation sessions. And this photograph is taken during the Paris Agreement, which was also a success. Again, that's a different story, but what she says, this is about expectations, to be realistic. So lesson number 3, avoidance escalates conflict and deepens divisions. So conflict often worsens when tension is avoided rather than addressed. And so I put it this fuse box, because tension, if we address tensions before they turn into a conflict, it's like a fuse box, you know, because when it turns into conflicts, it will just erupt. So sources of conflict, you know, can be differing beliefs, competition for resources, miscommunication, whatever it is. It is most of us, I mean, I'm very aware that I'm talking to a group of therapists. So it'd be lovely to hear your views on it, but you definitely have more you definitely have a very educated approach to this conflict, because you work with people in conflict with themselves and in others. But generally speaking, the people I work with, I would say that we tend to avoid conflict. People tend to avoid conflict naturally than not. And what happens is, so again, another tool, let's look at this. So what happens is this bell curve is produced for peace building, so like war zones. However, this actually applies to conflict at all levels. So and the avoidance is when it's latent. So if you see the very left-hand side end of it, latent conflict, we sometimes confuse it with peace. Latent conflict is not peace. It's ready to erupt, because it's going to emerge, it's going to escalate, and it's going to peak somewhere. And then sometimes with the right tools, it can de-escalate, but sometimes it just stays forever in that conflict, or for a very long time. So this, again, timeline tool, making a timeline, help understand whether we're avoiding anything or not. And if it actually passed that stage, then how are we going to intervene? It depends on where we are in the conflict. Gandhi said, peace is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to cope with it. And often people turn a blind eye when conflict is latent. Next lesson, are biases. Seeing biases and limits prevents harm and fatigue. So in high pressure environments, whether in war zones or in social activism, understanding and acknowledging our own biases is essential. So maybe what I will say will be controversial. I don't know. I'd love to hear what you think about this, but whether we like it or not, I think we all carry some biases. Because everyone holds biases shaped by their experiences, cultures, perspectives, and so many other trauma, past trauma. And in my mind, the key is not to deny the biases, but maybe actively recognize and manage them. I mean, can we reflect honestly on our assumptions and how they influence our actions? And can we seek diverse perspectives to challenge and broaden our understanding? How can we do that if we can? I mean, it's a very uncomfortable place to recognize, actually, do you know what? I do have a bias inside of me, but I don't have to act on it. That's the difference. In fact, I would argue that recognizing recognizing the bias prevents us acting on it. So I just want to introduce a tool about looking at our biases, which is something that we use in high-stake environments. So this is called a okay, so I can still get, yeah. So this is called actor mapping. It's basically the blue balloons that you see are the parties and it's often conflicts have more than one party. So for instance, if you think about a family, say a problem between husband and wife is never just that. There are children involved, there are families involved, even there may be employers are involved, directly or indirectly. So it's just about mapping it. And then once we map it, these lines represent like these between party C and party D, there are two lines because they have a strong connection. And whereas party C and party B have a weaker connection, party C and A are broken. Party A and party D are clashing. So that's where the violence is maybe. And they're also outside stakeholders. So who are these people? And issues, we can also do issue mapping as well. But the thing about biases is this yellow point is where are you in there? Where are you in there? Okay, lesson number 5, intentional engagement prevents reactive superficial practice. So actively and purposefully connecting to the conflict. So intentional engagement is not active listening. It includes active listening, but intentional engagement is actually, as opposed to reactive communication. This quote always, I find that quite hard to really swallow hearing it, but anyway, this is quite, again, controversial. In order to empathize with the cruel and heartless, you have to imagine being cruel and heartless yourself. You may or may not agree. So it doesn't say you have to be cruel and heartless. It says you have to imagine being cruel and heartless yourself. So one example that I give is from South Africa. I mean, I don't know if you heard about or do you know about Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but it's about Truth and Reconciliation Commission happened after the apartheid system was dissolved. And it's a powerful example of intentional engagement because in the face of very deep conflict and division, rather than reacting superficially to the violence of apartheid, this commission actively and purposefully sought to engage with the complex human experiences of perpetrators and victims. So the commission encouraged perpetrators to openly confront their actions. And while victims share their stories of suffering. So that's how can we use this in our daily lives or in our communities is what I ask myself. Lesson number six, we have this one and one other left, and I will close. Flexibility brings strength and sustains momentum. There is no room for being rigid in high-stake environments. So I put the bamboo trees because they say that bamboo trees are quite slim and thin, but they are the long-lasting ones, when there is a strong wind, they are the one, because they can actually bend. So I saw the expression crisis management as a bamboo. I just really like that. So it's about flexibility and adaptability. So it's about making adaptive decision-making skills. And just to give an example, so this is from yeah, somebody was asking the sort of fifth lesson. I just see somebody asking, fifth lesson is the intentional engagement prevents reactive superficial practice. So the Colombian experience. So how does flexibility apply to this? So what you're seeing in this picture is the area where which resided former combatants. Basically, in 3 sentences, what happened in Colombia was, in November 2016, 4 years of peace talks in Colombia ended between the former guerrilla FARC, F-A-R-C, Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, versus the Colombian government. We're talking about 8 million victims we're talking about a very large scale, decades worth of 50-year worth of conflict. But the thing is, so following decades of that, an adaptive and context-sensitive approach was needed. So the reintegration process recognized that success depended. You can't just do the ceasefire arrangement. What do you do afterwards? Because these people, the people who were the FARC guerrillas, they didn't live in the Colombian community. They didn't really know how to integrate. So there was a staged integration program, not perfect. A lot of criticism are there, but it was flexible enough to understand the needs of what the sides, needs of the sides, so that appropriate staging of their integration could be achieved. And the very last lesson, now planning for the aftermath relapse, planning for the aftermath prevents relapse. Now I'm going to now show you some, again, some upsetting pictures. Apologies for that, but this is the only way to understand what we mean by aftermath. So effective conflict resolution doesn't end with a breakthrough. It requires careful planning what's going to happen afterwards. So I'm going to now show you a series of photographs. These are not, I didn't take those. I have not been to Syria, but this is all from Syria. You will see now side by side, 6, 7 slides before and after. So this photograph, before, as you can see, it was a cafe, and this is, you could see the buildings behind, and this is after. This is what happened after. This is what we're talking about. Even if, I mean, if the Syria is very complicated now, but in most places, when there is a peace agreement, you still end up with these ruins. And I think the same may be within individual conflicts, within employee conflicts. You still have to go back on Monday and sit across the table. Even if there was an agreement made with this other employee, you still have to sit on Monday with them across the table. So aftermath is often not overlooked. Again, aftermath, Syria, before and after. It's devastating just even to look at it. The aftermath from a market, before and after. Aftermath, before and after. Before and after. Before and after. So we get, without ongoing support and follow-up, the communities, I'll just stop the share now. Without ongoing support and follow-up, communities and individuals risk slipping back into old patterns of things like mistrust and violence and trauma. So these are my lessons. I'm going to stop now just to finish it. For me, what the underlying what I take out from these lessons for myself is, and what fascinates me is how universal the patterns are, and therefore these pragmatic approaches can help us in other contexts because they are very pragmatic and they're very actionable. And I hope that somebody took something out of this, and I am very happy to answer questions or hear your views. Just come in. I don't know, John, can people mute themselves, unmute themselves? I don't know, but
Yeah, I think we're just taking care of
thank
the
you for hearing.
microphones.
Thank you for hearing me.
Yeshim, thank you so much for that presentation. Just very powerful and very moving to hear about your work and those lessons and the principles. Let's just make sure the microphones are unlocked. So if anybody wants to click the unmute button, you can.
This is Tom from California, Silicon Valley area. I just want to
Hi,
highlight
Tom.
on it. Yes, hi. I just want to highlight on a couple of things. Unless it's a politically sensitive area, it doesn't get the attention. Unless there is an economical benefit with most countries, it doesn't get the attention. If you look back in the 90s, you look at Rwanda, 250,000 people displaced, over 500,000 to 1 million. They don't know the count because no one was interested. But the problem was they had no economic incentive for the US or European Union or any other countries. So that's oftentimes countries fall through the cracks. Syria is a visual point because it connects to Israel on bombings and things like that. So that gets more visualization. But many atrocities are happening around the world. And I'm wondering how we're going to gain a visualization of that and more interest in people more than economic value. Thank you.
Thank you. That's yeah, that's very poignant. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that contribution. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, somebody just wrote something on the by the way, you can also write. If you don't want to speak, you can also write. Somebody wrote, many thanks. I'd like to contribute regarding the patterns and our attachment system as human beings. Yes, come ahead, it's Beth.
Yes, thank you. So as a psychotherapist, this is something I think about a lot. I started off doing a politics degree, politics and international relations, and I ended up deciding to work on the personal level as a transpersonal psychotherapist, helping people connect to their values and to live out those values. So I try to keep my foot in the political world as well. And from neuroscience, which all of us who are therapists are studying, we understand now that we are hardwired to be tribal, to be mutually supportive within our group. That is how our brain is designed, and we can be brilliant at it. We feel happier and less anxious when we're mutually supportive in our group. The problem is the othering that you speak of. We have not yet reached the stage in evolution, if we ever do, when we see the whole world as our tribe. That's what I see as the problem. And the bigger the groups and the more different the groups, the harder it is, it seems, for us to include everyone in our attachment system. And we're very prone to influence by propaganda, by, you know, whether it's capitalist or not, the propaganda that others, deliberately others, people, So, I mean, I'd like your view on that, because that's what I see as the massive problem that we're having. The potential of the human being is that the whole world would be mutually cooperative. We'd be one tribe and we could then solve all our problems. But the obstacle is that we see the other as a different tribe and a threat. So that's what I wanted to share.
I'm muted. Thank you. That's another beautiful contribution. It sounds like such a wonderful vision. And I think for me, I want to say amen. Yes, yes, that vision. And that's, I don't know if we will see that. I don't think I will see that in my lifetime. But do you know, for me, I don't, things are very demoralizing at the moment, especially. And I want to think like you do, and I don't want to give up the hope, which is why I love connecting to people like yourselves. Actually, I'm talking as a community here, and programs like Task, and organized networks like Task, because we are like-minded. And I think it's about having that hope and never actually giving up on that. I haven't given up on that hope, but I'm not expecting it. It's about managing my own expectations. I think one of the big problems that I see is when you take out something from someone's life, if it's even if it's a bad thing, you still leave a gap. That gap still needs to be filled. And at the moment, othering is such a powerful tool to bond that unless we replace that with something else, and what can that be? I don't know. I have my own answers, but I don't know. We need to, for me, if I'm going to do activism, which I did many years in, we worked in British Parliament to increase the peace building budget as opposed to the defense budget, and with some success actually. But it is about replacing that void which is there. Yeah, that is.
Don't you think, do you agree with me that governments exploit the tendency to other?
Well, absolutely, well, this session is recorded and it's going to be on YouTube, and I have my own views about all sorts of things, but I'll just keep it to, I think governments, especially the media, the education system, are all working for the same thing, and the power imbalances are so big and getting bigger. So yeah, it's not just how our state works, but also sadly the media as well, and then so many other things. I mean, yeah, people in power positions, why should they give up power? There are sorry, yeah, come on in. Somebody wants to speak, and there are also
Yes,
some.
I'm sorry, this is Tom. One of the things I'm noticing, I see the cheerleader governments coming out for different things. Like NATO. I don't think the previous Prime Minister Trudeau ever missed a NATO party. However, Canada in 2023, there's a hope or goal of 5% GDP to target. And we expect NATO members as a voluntary connection to give at least 3% plus. Canada donated 1.3%, a measly amount. And the United States picked up the difference.
Sorry to interrupt you. And Tom, I noticed we've just got a minute or two left before we go to break.
Yes,
Could I just move you towards a question for Yeshim?
Yes, I'm just wondering if there's more community involvement that can get the different leaders to step up to the plate and contribute to national and worldly opportunities for getting involved and donating into the world. I think a lot of Countries
Yeah.
talk about it, but they don't contribute.
Thank you. Tom, what I will do is because we're now going to stop and then there'll be a session, we can discuss that after. So what I'll do is I'll just acknowledge the other, but thank you for that. I'll just acknowledge the other messages. Nick wrote, I'm interested in how to approach disputes where there is a complete asymmetry of resources and one party can act with impunity. How do we address disputes when one side knows they don't have to resolve it? In fact, it may not even be in their interest to move to a resolution. I'm not specifically talking about an obvious example at the moment, but potentially even the violence of workplace relations, or at least help people heal. Yes, absolutely. So this is about you know, that's beautiful. There's the bell curve that I showed. People often are not prepared to negotiate unless both parties are hurting. Again, if you want to stay a bit longer, we can discuss that. So thank you for that contribution. Somebody wrote, as a student of humans, the political has never not been a part of the study. I grew up between worlds and now work as a psychotherapist and researcher in the area of a third culture kids. I see a lot of evidence that when we are taught out of biases, these kids grow up differently and perceive the world from a multiscopic lens. There is hope. Thank you for that, Miriam. And then there's an S. Gardner. I'd love to take away the mapping and see if it can help children resolve differences in school. Well, I can tell you, I have a teenager and she uses it. We use it together. I think this could be powerful teaching. And then Tabitha wrote, I'm interested in to know what sort of reception you get from the local people when you go into zones of conflict as an outsider. How do you navigate any understandable animosity? Oh, thank you. Well, I'm trained in that. We don't go immediately. We just build this very, very slowly. And also, yes, I have, you know, we're used to being well, I've only been physically attacked once, let's put it that way, 17 years, and I've only been attacked once physically. Verbal attacks is fine because they're often engaging and they're always, you know, mediators are often the easiest target because if they attack each other, the stakes are too high. So we are the obvious choice. So that's okay. For me, the hostility doesn't worry me. Lack of engagement does. So, but I'm very aware it's 18:02, so I'll just leave. I'm very happy to stay until 6:30, but would you like to come in and tell us what now?
Yes. Thank you, Yeshim. Thank you for responding to the comments on voice and in the chat as well, and just for a wonderful hour together. Really appreciate it.